G'day all, it's Colin from PCTLC and thanks for joining me. In this video I want to discuss a few things regarding dual booting Linux and Windows, and mainly it's Ubuntu that I want to discuss. A little while ago I made a series of videos, about three or four, how to dual boot Ubuntu or install Ubuntu alongside Windows 10 with the data partition, separate data partition, a basic install alongside, and also install with home partition. So let's just check those videos out. So these are the videos in question. Is Ubuntu 1904 installed a separate partition alongside Windows 10. Ubuntu 1904 install alongside Windows 10. Install with separate home partition and install with separate data partition. I think I did just the normal long side. Yep, that's the one there. So that were all done with Ubuntu 1904. So I think I just had that in my mind at the time, and Ubuntu 1904 just happened to come out. It's not a long-term support, but I think people do work out what the latest Ubuntu is. But I was thinking about redoing this type of series on the 20.04 because it's a long-term support. That's probably the better Ubuntu to use, and I might even throw in a Linux Mint. I'm not sure, I'm just thinking about some ideas at the moment. But I took on a bit of responsibility to do like a dual booting situation. Don't call it a dual boot, I call it install alongside. It is a dual boot at the end of the day. And I did that because I understand that when people come to Linux, they still want that Windows as their safety net to go back to. And I remember when I started using Linux, I felt the same way. I wanted something I could go back to, and I wanted Windows to be there. And I dual booted Windows and Linux for a long time. Sorry about the noise there, the neighbors are cutting the grass. What I wanted to discuss in this video, a comment that I've got quite a few times since uploading these videos is I don't have the EFI option, and I wanted to cover the issues that could come up in regards to not having EFI option when installing Ubuntu alongside Windows 10. And that seems to be one of the main comments I get all the time. So what I'm going to do here, we're going to boot up Windows 10 with an Ubuntu attached to it in Virtualbox. Once you've got an install in place in Virtualbox, to get another ISO to boot, you need to press the right control button and the escape key to get the boot menu up and running like so. Then we arrow down to boot manager, and then we choose UEFI VBox there, and that should boot Ubuntu live desktop. We'll skip that, Control C. Let's just say you've downloaded your ISO, you've written your ISO to USB, you've attached it to your laptop or PC or whatever it is, and you've booted it up. And you're running Ubuntu live. That's try Ubuntu live. So selecting try Ubuntu, it puts you in the live desktop. Now what we want to do is we want to look for gparted. That's what we need to do first up. So just be careful what you do with gparted, because it's a very powerful tool and you can delete things. But what we want to do is just get some information from gparted. Now what I have done is this is a Windows 10 UEFI, this install here on Virtualbox. And you can see by looking at this system here, all the partitions of Windows, NTFS, FAT32, Microsoft reserved partition, and basic data partition, NTFS as well. NTFS only works on Windows. You can read it through Ubuntu. So that's the first thing we look at. And if we go to view device information, you can see there that the partition table is GPT. GPT is what we use for UEFI partition. So if you boot, if your BIOS is set to boot by default UEFI, when you install Windows, it'll just automatically partition the disk with a GPT partition table. That's how it works. Now that would have booted in EFI because my settings here, let's just check that out, machine settings. If we have a look under system, it's enable EFI special OSs only. So it's booting in EFI. So naturally Ubuntu is going to detect that it's already booting in EFI. So it's going to install with EFI. It's because it's already running under that system. So let's power that off. And what I want to do is change the settings there. I want to so that's it's automatically taken that ISO off. So now we've got Windows 10 Legacy. Let's just attach the Ubuntu to the Legacy. Let's remove the VBox guest editions there. And let's just attach Ubuntu 2004. Same deal, right control escape key. Well, it's booted anyway. Try Ubuntu without installing. So you see the menu is different already to what it was in EFI. We'll just skip the check because it's been checked many times. Don't want to wait for the check again. So that was interesting. I probably didn't even have to do the control escape because it automatically seen the Ubuntu under Legacy anyway. All right, so we're gonna, it'll come up with the menu or that little box, try it or install it. And then again, maybe not. Okay, maybe it doesn't do that under Legacy. I'm not sure. So anyway, what we're going to do is search for gparted. So under Legacy, it's just put us directly into the live desktop. So as you can see here, NTFS, that's our file system there for Windows. Just two file systems, very simple, system reserved, and that's where everything's installed to. And if we view the device information, the partition table is MS-DOS. Okay, so we've established that. Now, what I'm getting to here is where some people might be going wrong when they're doing some installs. So let's get to that. This is what I believe people may be doing wrong. So I've got a series of photos here, and they're all my devices here. And I want to go through those. So if there's a few too many, just ignore it. I was just trying to get the best picture that I could. This one here is obviously my Toshiba. That's the boot menu there. Toshiba USB, so it only gives me the option of booting in USB on that one because it's already set on UEFI, I believe, or it might be set on Legacy. I can't remember that one. The Toshiba here, actually, let's just go to the next one. Sorry. The Toshiba is my USB. I'm getting USBs mixed up with devices now. So this boot manager here is, I think, the Lenovo. Now the Lenovo, the notebook, is just picking up Toshiba USB. It's only got one option. It's the USB Toshiba. It's a 16 gig USB stick. One option only. That's my boot manager. So I think that was function and F12 to boot into that one. This is my main system that's running Pop! OS. And this is where people may be getting it wrong. And I want to point this out. We have two USBs here. Now, on this system, because it's newer, I can choose to boot into USB or UEFI USB. So if I'm already running Windows on this system and it's installed under UEFI, but I boot this USB here, that's booting in Legacy, and it allows me to do that. And that's where people might be running the USB in Legacy rather than UEFI. So you need to make sure, if you've got a modern BIOS and this boot manager here and I think this one is F10, I think. Let me have a look, F10 or possibly F12 for boot manager. So they're all different, depends on the device. It could be F10, F2, escape. It should give you on when it loads the boot information on the screen, it should give you an option for a boot manager. Some do, some don't. So this is where people could be using their boot manager to boot the USB, but they may be booting into Legacy, booting Ubuntu into Legacy, whereas Windows is running EFI. So if they're doing that, you're not going to get an EFI option when installing Ubuntu. And that's where people could be going wrong. That's what I suspect. This is my other desktop that I've got down here, underneath the bench here. And again, this one has the same sort of thing. There's my Toshiba USB right there. And I also have UEFI Toshiba, right? So you need to know which, whether you're running under Legacy or you're running under EFI. And then you need to choose the correct boot of the USB, whether it be EFI or whether it be just USB. Just USB is Legacy, EFI is obviously EFI. So you've got to be careful of that when you're booting. Once again, we got here, I've got a choice of booting USB only. So if there's only one choice, but your machine or device or PC, laptop, whatever it may be, you may have to go into the BIOS and change the BIOS to UEFI or to Legacy, depending what you want to boot in. But if Windows is already there, you need to establish, like I did at the start of the video with Gparted, just to look at the partitions of Windows, whether it's got a UEFI or whether it's got an MS-DOS or no UEFI in the partition structure. But also, if there's only one option on the device, I'd have to think that it will automatically boot whatever Windows is booting in. So that shouldn't really be an issue on those ones, because if you have to go into the BIOS to change it and you don't get another option, then you're going to be booting the same as what Windows is booting anyway. And that's my what's it called, Toshiba laptop here, and that's my option. CSM boot is Legacy, and UEFI boot's obviously UEFI. So that's the one I get to choose what it boots up in, and that's my option there. I think this one is the Lenovo laptop, and I've got the EFI USB there and USB down there. So that will boot into Legacy. This one will boot into EFI. So you've got to be careful not to boot into the wrong one. And they're just the same images. I was just trying to get a good photo, but the quality there is not too bad considering. And that's a photo of my Lenovo laptop. You can see there you've got the EFI USB and USB Toshiba there as well. You've got the two options, which is that there. So the most important message I'm trying to get across here is, if you have two options on your device or machine or whatever it is for a USB or UEFI USB, you have to make sure that you know what Windows is booting in, and you can use Gparted to do that. There might be other ways, but this is a bit of a trap, having these two options, because these machines allow you to boot into either one regardless what Windows is running. I've made that mistake before. I think I installed a Linux Mint on a Virtualbox and I actually think I booted it, or no, it could have been on it was on real hardware, and I've installed Linux Mint and I actually chose the wrong USB. Didn't realize, probably a bit tired, fatigued or something, and I've actually hit the wrong USB, installed it, and it just says please insert a disk or select the correct hard drive to boot from, or whatever it says. And I was a bit stumped as to what was going on, and I realized that I had installed under Legacy instead of UEFI. and I thought, oh geez, I've got to reinstall it again. So I think this is where those questions are coming from. People might be actually booting up under the wrong one. So make sure that if you are dual booting and you're actually starting up any USB on a device that's already currently running Windows and you're going to do a dual boot, this is the most important step you can take in getting it right the first time. So if you're not familiar with a BIOS like this and you're concerned about changing these type of things, but you do have the two options in the boot manager of your device to boot either Legacy or UEFI, then you really need to make sure that what I did at the start of the video, you can identify what your Windows is booting in. And you can probably do that in Windows itself. I'm not really sure. Now, if we have a look in Windows 10, this is a UEFI one I've just decided to boot up, control panel. Let's have a look under control panel system. Don't know if there's anything under there. 64-bit. We could probably go right click here and go to device, disk management, and see whether it tells us under disk management. So that's full screen that. So yeah, under disk management you can see, so if you want to check it out under Windows before you do any dual booting, it has an EFI system partition, so you know it's booting under EFI. So that's the other way you can do it. Let's just check out the Legacy install. So let's shut that one down and we'll boot up Legacy and check the Legacy one. So you can see there's an EFI system partition on there. So if you was to boot your USB under your boot manager, you would choose the UEFI USB. So I've booted up into on the Legacy Windows 10 install. Right click the menu and go to disk management. Don't know why these things are so long. So you can see healthy boot page, NTFS. So there's no mention of UEFI anywhere at all. And UEFI will have 4 partitions and not 2. So Legacy has two partitions only. UEFI has a lot more reserved and backup. I can't remember what it's called, reserved or something like that. You can go back in the video and check it out. It'll tell you. But yeah, that would be a Legacy boot. As you can see, 2 partitions only, no mention of UEFI. So if you was to boot Ubuntu alongside this install, you would be choosing the USB, whatever the USB stick name is, and with no mention of UEFI. And remembering that's if you got 2 options. If you got 1 option, then the USB will be booting with that same option that Windows is already booting in or with. Yeah, so those comments have been on my mind for quite a long time because it sort of had me thinking, why are these people asking these questions, trying to help them out as much as I can, and why do they not have that option? And it was going through my mind. I was thinking, why? And I have a feeling and I suspect that these are the reasons why. So that's why I wanted to make this video, to reconfirm first that people are doing the right thing straight off the bat before they do any installing at all, that they know exactly that they're choosing the correct procedure in the first place. So if we have a look here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to boot my Silicon Power 16 gigabyte USB 3 with Windows 10 on it. And what I'm going to do is boot it on, let's just see the screenshot or the photo that I took. Okay, so that's Silicon Power. So there you've got the 2 options, UFD, UEFI, UFD. I don't know why it calls it UFD. Some of them call it USB. Some of them have different names, as long as the name matches your USB. So you got the Legacy and also Legacy there, and if we have a look at the next picture, you've got UEFI. So this is going to be booting that 16 gigabyte silicon power under EFI, and I'm going to install Windows 10. So that's the plan. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to right click and choose disk management in Windows 10 UEFI. So let's just quickly check that out. Double click that. EFI system partition, 100 megabytes. That's my USB stick there. So there's we have three partitions for Windows 10. I always thought I had more than that, don't know why. I thought it also did a recovery partition, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't do that these days, I'm not sure. But anyway, what we're going to do here is right click, shrink volume, give myself 40 gigs here, 40,000, and shrink that. And there we have unallocated space. Now you can either do a new simple volume, or we can see how Ubuntu works with that unallocated space. Let's do that. So there's our 40 gig. So we're going to boot into Ubuntu Live Desktop on Legacy and see what the results are. And next what we're going to be doing is booting Ubuntu in Legacy mode. So this is my USB stick. Can't quite read that. I don't know if I took a better photo. It's Toshiba 16 gig USB 3. That's that one there. I thought I took a better photo than that, but maybe I've grabbed the wrong one. But you get the gist of the story there. And if we have a look at the boot menu, see this one comes up as Toshiba, and there's UEFI Toshiba USB, not UFD. I don't know why. Must be the type of USB stick it is, depending what comes up. So I'll be booting Ubuntu 20.04.2 under Toshiba USB, which will be Legacy. And we will try and install that using a UEFI environment to see what sort of results we get. So let's do that. So here we are on the live desktop of Ubuntu 20.04.2. Legacy I booted in Legacy. So let's see how we go with that. Let's choose Install Ubuntu without using gparted whatsoever. And remember the disk from Windows was left as unallocated. So let's continue that. So I'm assuming anyone who is new to Linux is just going to go directly to the installer. They're not going to use gparted. So I would assume that's what the new people coming to Linux would do. And normally they'd be following what I'd be doing is something else. So that's what they'd normally be doing. Then we'll go to the free space here. So we'll go, let's see, we'll add a 512 numlock first, 512 megabytes, be a primary. It will be a FAT32. So there it is right there. I thought I would actually go through this process just because I wanted to prove myself right to start with, because I started having doubts as to whether what I was talking about was right or wrong. So right there is where people are going to say, right, they're following my video, they've booted up into Legacy, Windows is running EFI, and you're following my video, and you're saying to me, I don't have the choice of EFI, mount point. And that's the reason why, because we're booted in Legacy, not EFI. So that's where the issue could begin. So let's quit that. Let's quit the installer. Let's do that. Let's run gparted. Now, even in gparted, we'll see what happens. Now, if we view the device information, it's GPT. So quite clearly we can see that. So what we're going to do here is a new 512 primary partition. It's going to be FAT32, and we'd probably mark it as EFI boot. Let's add that. Then just for the purpose of this video, what do I normally do? We'll do a swap, 4096. Let's do that just for this. That's going to be a Linux swap. Swap. And we'll make the rest an ext4, and we'll call that root. That's going to be the root partition. So everything will be in root. There'll be no separate data. So let's just do that and apply that. Let's close that. And let's see if we get the option for this one. Manage flags, boot ESP. So it lets you do that in gparted. Then we run the installer. Little jingle there for Ubuntu installer. So let's continue that. Something else we're going to do. Now SDA5, don't forget you had the 4 partitions there for Windows. So our first one is, the first one that I did is the FAT32. So we're going to do that. We'll make it ext4 and mount point. And there's no EFI boot. So I've had to redo this bit here. You'll probably notice the date is a little bit different. I did originally choose ext4 for this one, and don't ask me why I did that. So what we need to do is choose FAT32 and choose our mount point. Now I did choose originally ext4, and you can see the options are the same anyway, so it doesn't really change, but it should be FAT32 for that. And if you have a look, there is no EFI boot because it's been booted in Legacy. So both scenarios there, you don't have EFI boot or you don't have EFI option. You just don't have the EFI option when you're running under Legacy. So I think that's where that question comes from. I'm pretty sure. So I needed to go through this process to prove it to myself that that is what's going on there. So I'm hoping that people watch this video before they even start installing Linux, and just so they know the difference between EFI and Legacy boot. It's very important that you know that, because you could be wasting all this time and you're probably thinking Linux sucks. And it doesn't, it's just lack of knowledge, and that's all it is. I've learnt all my knowledge from making all these mistakes and time and taking up all my time. And that's the reason why I do it. And that's the reason why I share my videos, to help people out in these scenarios here. So I'm not going to go any further with that installation. I'm going to quit there, and I'm going to shut this down and probably have a quick chat about this and end the video. So yeah, that's the information I wanted to get out there. It was on my mind for a while. I've done a little bit of research about it. I have a feeling or suspect that that was all what was going on there. And that's where the questions are coming from. So I might make this my #1 video that I can link to in any future installs I do for Ubuntu, Linux Mint. It doesn't matter what Linux you're installing. If it's Ubuntu based, then all this applies anyway. The installers may vary slightly, but still applies. Same rule applies for installing an Ubuntu based distro. So that's it for this video. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you found it interesting and informative. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.